And I definitely think that would take a toll on your self-worth to start with, And second,
Okay.
when it's something your livelihood depends on, that's when you probably go into panic mode because how are you gonna, maybe cater to your family or just meet your general basic needs also just to survive, in terms of food, utilities, all that. So it sounds very scary, frankly speaking. I've never been through it, touch wood, but uh,
Mm-hmm.
it definitely does not sound like a good situation at all, is what I would say. It sounds like a horrible situation. I mean, sure, if someone has like a backup or something, but that's rarely the case when you lose a job.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that,
But you know what I find surprising is that today all of us are talking about how loss of job is similar to grieving. And in some sense, yes, it is. But if I were to ask you guys, or even if I were to ask myself, are we okay to lose a human being who means something to us? It just wouldn't match. We'd be like, to
Yeah.
hell with the job. I'd like to save the individual and the relationship and the person. So while the emotions of anxiety, panic, depression, self-worth questioning, all of that can come, the guilt and I should have done more, I could have saved my job like that. But end of the day, somehow we human beings are so resilient, or we are so clear-headed and segregated in our approach that a job can be found. Like, how Sarah was talking about choosing a job that's lower than what you are trained to do, or you even then, if it was an apocalypse, you would pick it up
Mm-hmm.
because it would be about survival. It wouldn't be a privilege anymore. But family or human beings, that would be really important. I feel that. I think that that's shared by generally human beings.
That's so true. I think taking from that, I'm actually realizing that today's session is also named as when one door closes, another opens. So losing a job could actually look like an opportunity, but initially, of course, it triggers a lot of emotional responses, and we'll have to consider that. We'll have to validate all of those feelings. But I think with time, it does open a lot of space for you to also understand what was it which was not making sense, what was it which you lacked as a skill that you can probably improve at. So losing a job could be a lot of things for a lot of people. It could be, as I think Sahir or Radhika was actually talking about, how losing a job could also financially hit you at spots and make you go in a lot of stress, not realizing how the next month is going to look like, or how we're going to manage the finances and all of that. So all of these expressions and feelings of that stress would differ for every individual depending upon what that job means. But yes, as you were saying, Sindhu, that it cannot be compared to losing of a person or a loss of a person.
I agree. But like I was thinking about it in a different lens. Like for example, a person has their own business or they started out something that they always wanted to. They have this passion and they put in all of their like sweat, blood, tears, everything into it, and it doesn't work out. So it's like you're losing a part of yourself. It's like losing your identity. So of course you cannot compare it to losing a person, but it's as though you're losing a part of yourself. It's same as like losing a job that you had given 15 years of your life to. It's
Right.
quite tough. Yeah.
It is. And you're right when you talked about losing an identity. I think in some sense your job is an extension of you, especially for people who enjoy what they're doing. And it represents more than a salary or a pay stub. It represents hope in a lot of cases. It represents escape in a lot of cases too. Like I know a lot of women, for them the job means they get an opportunity to get out of their very morbid everyday life, step out and become something else. For, say, my brother in the army, his job is not his job, it is his life. So, even though he's given opportunities at various stages to take retirement, he doesn't because it's really different for a lot of people. So I suppose loss of job for some reason in those circumstances would hit them so hard that it would be difficult to recover from it. Like cases where they have a lot of finances at stake, like children to educate, or they bought a house, EMIs need to be paid, old parents need to be looked after, and if there is this member who loses a job. And during COVID, I think Sarah was mentioning COVID and how many people lost their job. I remember there were times when in a day I would get at least 4 or 5 calls about job losses and things associated because people were getting laid off, especially the smaller enterprises. They were laying off people. So you're right. The expression of the loss, while it would vary, but it's intense.
I've also seen people getting, before they get sad or like go into that loop of loss, they have a lot of anger when they lose something. It's just the first thought is, how could this happen to me? You know, it's just you don't know how to deal with it because you're just so angry that you have done so much for something and they just laid you off, or it didn't work out, or something happened.
Yeah, I agree. And especially, when you've been with a company or an organization long term, it's like you've invested so much of yourself in it as well. I mean, this is obviously barring the financial challenges that come with job loss. It's also so many people who are associated with so many different organizations for like more than 10 years, right? More than a decade. And they invested so much in the company, and that like then when I say that, I mean they were so mentally, emotionally also invested. I'm not talking about anything monetary right now. So that sense of identity, like Sindhu said, it's an extension of who you are, right? If you love your job, and that would definitely impact, because the world had never seen something like this at this scale, especially, right? And to see that happen to so many people all at once, it was, I really hope we never have to see that again, honestly. Like the emotional tax it would take on people um, was too large to even keep track of after a point. And that's the sad part. That's the
And
pandemic.
hmm,
Go on, go on.
no. I was just thinking about right now as well in the UK where the economy is in recession, and a lot part of lots of cities and countries in the world. India so far has been largely okay. We are in survival mode, but in a lot of countries they're really struggling. And one of the impacts I saw of that is that the people who were in sessions and paying through their organizations to get help for mental health, they are withdrawing getting support for mental health first, because when it comes to survival, you feel your brain health is something you can't right now afford to look after. And that to me is shocking and understandable too. So while I get it, like, when you're thinking of very basic things like food and shelter and water and electricity and gas, at that point of time, you don't want to spend money talking to a therapist and talk about emotional issues, because every day you are fighting against life and death and just surviving and keeping your family afloat. And that to me, that is very sad, right? A job loss can bring so many other impacts, isn't it? People have lost social connections due to it. I mean, have you heard of people when they lose jobs, they also lose that connection?
100%. I think I have had a lot of people who have told that they would not want to attend a specific party or attend a specific gathering because all that people talk about is, how are you? So, what are you doing? And then you do not have an answer. You do not have the lifestyle to actually match up the expectations that these people have about how the life would look like when you have a job. So, I've had people come to me and tell me that it's so much better to not answer people when they ask these questions of what you're doing recently. So where did you join? And sometimes even hearing about somebody else getting promoted or somebody else changing their job makes them feel a little less confident, and it hits their self-esteem as to everybody's getting job, but what about me? Why am I not getting a job? So this does happen, and yeah, that's one of the factors which hit you.
Adding to your point, I'm so sorry, Sahil.
Oh, go on.
Yeah. like adding to your point, like especially in the culture that we live in, it's a very corporate style culture that we live in. Ki, yeah, you have to have like a prestigious job, and if you lose it, you cannot tell people that a person lost their job. There's a lot of shame connected to it. Dealing with that shame and dealing with people trying to, for example, your family doesn't want to tell your relatives that you lost a job because it's shameful. So you have to deal with that shame on top of all the loss, you know?
Mm,
And I think what's interesting is, I mean, now that I'm going to get some theory into this conversation as well, how job loss will, like when I was looking at it at the time, I strongly associated it with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, because the job does cover the basic, physiological needs, which is your food, your shelter, all the basic stuff. But then other than that, the job itself that like fulfill that need of safety, that need of security, which was, the second most important one, to say the least, on that hierarchy, on the pyramid. And I thought it was so closely tied, of course, self-esteem, sense of belonging, all of that too. But physiological and that need, the safety needs were clearly just zapped away the minute someone lost their job. So unless someone, had saved beforehand or had been saving, preparing. Now, most of the times people work jobs where they're earning to live. Majority of their savings go into literally just living. And so it was very sad to see a lot of people have to deal with the situation with no warning at all.
I had a question like, for all of you. For example, a person comes to you and says that they lost a job, but at the moment they're employed. But they tell you, okay, what if I never feel that sort of satisfaction again from what I work for? Because my last job just satisfied me in a way that it just made my expectations so high. What if I don't feel like that ever again? What would we say to them according to your experience?
Okay. I think, first of all, dealing with reality and accepting it without approving of it. So, this is a very important difference people need to understand. You can accept reality without approving it. Nobody wanted COVID, but we accepted it. We didn't approve of it. Our lives changed overnight for all of us in some way, but we didn't go around saying, oh, I love COVID. I love what it has done to us. We had to accept it. Similarly to a person who's going through a job loss or a situation like this where they were very satisfied, I would first of all help them understand reality and then recourse reality. That I feel is our job, to help them recourse their reality and discover where can we take them to where they can have a similar feeling of life satisfaction. Something similar, something new, something adventurous. So unpacking would be our job.
And okay, so like basically the topic that we have, one door closes and the other one opens up, right? Is there anything else that you would want to tell a person who hasn't opened that door yet? The other door.
Sometimes it's
So-
a state of mind.
Yeah, I just want to say that for a lot of people, sometimes a particular job becomes a comfort space. And we don't realize how sometimes that comfort space don't let you grow, don't let you explore what other aspects of your life you can actually work on, or what skills can you actually grow. And when a situation like that comes, as Sindhu said, that we can accept but not approve. And then when we recourse, we actually try and figure out what was it that this job was giving, which I can provide to myself, which I can provide through other aspects, other skills, or a different kind of job. A lot of people actually end up joining certain career options or occupations because that was the need of the hour. But after some time, they end up making a lot of money. They have that backup. And then they realize this particular job never gave them that satisfaction, that kick. And hence you will actually see a lot of startups that ends up happening is later in their age, when people actually realize that their passion lies there. So when
Maybe
you
the problem, Mehak, it is in the doors. Why do we human need doors to walk through? Like, I'm just thinking, if we use the metaphor about doors and window opening and all of that, I mean, do you think there is a little bit of psychological inflexibility there that, we always have to walk through it? I mean, I suppose any house or any place would have multiple doors and windows and definitely secret shafts to get into the house. So this could be a turning point. I think Seher was
that's
saying
a different
something before.
perspective. Yeah.
Were you saying something similar about doors?
I lost my chain of thought. I'm so sorry. I apologize. Um, but it was along those lines. Yes, it's
Yeah.
yeah.
So I just feel that, even if the next course of action doesn't turn out to be the perfect one, like, Mehak, what you spoke about is a perfect scenario. You have the privilege of hindsight. Later on, you look back and you're filled with gratitude and joy and say, like, I'm so glad I quit that job because I quit. That's why I'm doing something else. Those are a select few. But a lot of people that you both are talking about are people who are grieving the loss of identity, of hope, of this constant state of panic because a job loss, like you said in the beginning, it means so much more than a title loss.
Right.
I agree. And also, I think when when people choose their career paths or sort of on their journey, they become very regimented in their ways, in their plan, and this is that kind of a situation which throws you off completely. So, for example, again, going back to COVID, this is like my prime example because that's when I saw the largest number of layoffs all at once. But of course, it came with privilege. But a lot of people, well, after getting laid off, started pursuing passions they and got back in touch with a part of themselves that they had forgotten even existed for a very
Hmm.
long time, and perhaps followed that track. So it's kind of like, again, like Sindhu said, it's like it rerouted them completely. But
Hmm.
by the end of it, when they came out on the brighter side of the tunnel, or when they saw the light at the end of the tunnel, rather, they started accepting their reality and saying, okay, this isn't so bad. Maybe I would have never done this had that never happened. For example, like I know someone who got laid off, and now that woman's been traveling the world, and I mean, she's much older, and at this point, I think
Hmm.
mentally also she's in that place where she's like, I'm about to retire anyway, but she would have never pushed herself to travel or see the world as much.
Hmm.
And she's still been stuck in that job till she actually retired. And by then, another excuse or another excuse or another
Hmm.
excuse. So this sort of gave a lot of people also that push. We
Hmm.
saw takers emerge, right, in COVID. So many of these home,
Yeah.
for example, who
Yeah.
most of us didn't even like, if we personally knew them, we wouldn't even know this about them, that they enjoy baking or they enjoy cooking, for example. So these hobbies which they turned into a source of income, perhaps. Even if they didn't make as much, they were way more content, way less stressed.
Hmm.
So that, if I want to bring
Hmm.
some optimism here.
Yes. And I love that you're bringing optimism because all I can think of all the clients I see that are in terrible spaces because I have to bring this up right now, but uh, we say a client who's had a psychotic break, a very well accomplished engineer, but diagnosed with, say, something as tough as schizophrenia. Now, even after going through treatment, is unable to find a similar job or unable to find a regular, stable source of income. So now that person is reduced to working on shop floors. Nothing wrong with it. Perhaps it'll help that person go back to basic cognitive functioning and reorientation. But do you realize how hard it would be for the family? And I mean, forget how hard it is for the individual. It is really intensely hard. But even for the family, they've had to change schools to decisions about sell house and sell the cars and things like that. So I suppose all of us can agree on one thing when one has to prepare for all the curveballs that life will throw at you. And at the end of the day, what determines somebody making sense of that life would be how they relate to that loss. Like Sarah was giving an example of somebody turning a loss into a huge gain. Like, oh, it's such a beautiful reinvention and rebirth, right? But for someone to get there, they really need to talk. They need to work on things. They need to introspect. They need to talk to people like us, to various things, right? So it's not all, I suppose we can't just color it all with one stroke and say, oh, loss is great or it's terrible. We don't know. Just like we know so little about how life is lived.
Exactly. I think it would be especially way more taxing for someone knowing the buck stops at them and they
Yeah.
can't, they can't even bring all three meals to the table for their family when if they solely have to take that responsibility upon themselves and this situation occurs out of control, then what does one do? It's very hard
Mm.
to put on those rose tinted glasses.
Yeah.
Not that I'm trying to diminish the value of that. Sometimes
Right.
that's people through, but it really is situational.
Mm.
So
Agree.
I think taking that into account, it's never easy. But one hard reality is you have to take a shitty situation and make the most of it also. It's a very harsh truth of life. I feel, life may not always play the best cards, may not always deal out the best cards, but uh, resilience also involves having to power through the toughest of times, right? And that's what we as individuals need to focus on building. Obviously,
Mm.
this would entail so much more, say, financial security, something to back us up later if
Mm.
that were to occur. But
Mm.
resilience is something that if we're sorted on that front, it would make getting through the situation a lot easier. Is what I personally feel. But again, it's always different to be the person having gone through it versus the person
Mm.
who studied it. So yeah.
I wanted to share, like, not my experience, but I've seen someone go through the loss. Sometimes the job loss isn't something that you have been laid off again. You could quit something which meant a lot to you because it was necessary for you. For example, my dad worked 7 days a week. Um, I I didn't like he was a workaholic for most of his life because he grew up poor. He wanted to make a lot of money. He wanted to provide for his family. I understand. But it took a lot out of him. So around the age of like 40, 45, he decided to retire. It was a decision that he made, but it took a toll on him. There was the signs of job loss, the anger was there, the denial was there. Then it took him some time to reach that acceptance and
Mm.
take up something which was less anxiety provoking, something which
Mm.
was relaxing, that he was still earning, but he could say that, oh, I'm retired, but I work just
Mm.
because I like to be busy
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
work 3 to 4 hours. That's it.
Mm.
So it was a process. It's not always rainbows and sunshine. Even
Mm.
if you tried it, it's a
Mm.
process and you get there if you really want to.
That's a very good example, Radhika. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I just was recalling these instances and I figured how job losses also end up making you start seeking support in relationships that you never actually really asked for help, especially at home. It's a personal experience, but like I saw how at one point my dad lost his job and he had to be home for a whole year. And I remember how my mom was the only bread earner in the family, and my dad took up the other responsibilities so that he could equally support my mother
Yeah.
in this entire journey. And also, my mom was being empathetic about the fact that for him it's not easy because societal pressure is there, that need to just keep on doing something is there. And then we figured that it was necessary for him also to like shift his careers and figure out what he really wants to do. But then that support that your family members can actually give changes a
Mm.
lot that journey for you. Like I
100%.
never saw my mother actually ever complaining about the fact that you're home, it's difficult for me, how are we managing? It never happened like that. What ended up becoming was for my dad to actually find that space for himself to really grow.
Mm,
So it just made me realize that how
yeah.
relationships also get
But
impacted and
how interesting, Mehak,
grow.
that, in that example that you just shared, he challenged a lot of norms. Your mother challenged a lot of these conditioned norms, right?
Absolutely.
And I think job loss, like any loss, should need a lot of support. Like
Yeah.
if somebody is going through a bereavement over the loss of an individual, I suppose when somebody is going through a huge career transition, like a loss or being fired and laid off, family or friends would need to rally around that person and look for certain signs, like signs of something not being okay. And I can tell you from my experience, I always feel that the clients that I've seen where the job loss has impacted them hugely, the signs of suicidality or wanting the pain to end, the uncertainty to end, those are there. So I think people need to see that. And if we have a strong, safe environment at home, it's easier to save those people. It's easier for them to rebuild themselves. There are also people who actually do not tell their families they've lost a job. I mean, I know of friends who've actually never, for a year or so, did not share and they pretended to go to work, to business. And that, imagine what kind of isolation one would feel and loneliness.
Yeah, I think that's one of the takeaways, that we need to build better social support also for our partners, our family members, our friends in times of need, especially
Yeah,
like a loss of job. Or
right.
And
Absolutely.
also, I
And
think psychologists understand the value of social support. It's very hard to put it into perspective for, say, the layman, what social support would bring to the table, how it could make you a little more resilient, perhaps, right? But keeping this, like with this example of job loss and everything, like the example Mehak just gave, it sort of brought the family closer together. It sort of makes you realize that these are your pillars of strength, right? And sometimes for the longest time, one may not even consider that an actual resource. Like, I mean, your mind just won't go there unless you're thrown into a really tough situation and you see the people around you still trying to make the most of it.
Yeah,
Um,
mm,
absolutely. And even Radhika's example of a father taking a break or a retirement from one particular job and then reinventing a different kind of job to mitigate anxiety. Look, he prevented burnout. He earlier had never spent that much time, and then the family got closer, and he was able to pursue a lot of things. So I think
mhm.
it can turn out wonderful with the right kind of support, and that's something I suppose all of us agree on. That support at the right time from the right people would change course for any period of grief or any kind of grief.
Definitely. And also, as you mentioned, that there were people who don't tell their families or friends that they lost their job. There's a lot of shame and also guilt related to that. And that really impacts, it does push you towards isolation. And you really don't know what to do with that. So that is a very important point here
Yeah.
because, again, support. You really need support, especially in your bad times.
Yeah. Reduce shame, increase support. That's all I have to say. That, this is how we get through power through difficult circumstances by having
Mhm.
more and more conversations about what you are talking about right now. And
Mhm.
I'm just glad we're talking about it. And now we're at the end of our conversation.
Yes. Okay. So basically, we talked about job losses and the transitions. Some people are optimistic about it, and sometimes it's difficult to find the light in the tunnel, right? But it's important to have support. It's important to reduce the shame when it comes to job loss because you never know what's ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Door closes, you kick open the window or find the
definitely.
secret shaft, like I always feel.
Sometimes you don't realize that you don't have to open a door because you're outside already. You're not inside, stuck in some house or room.
Ah,
Mm.
that's interesting, Radhika. Yeah, for sure.
All right. So I guess we should end this session. If nobody has any questions, anything to add, maybe. All
Ah,
right. All right. This was
thank
a
you for doing
wonderful
this.
session.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for sharing your experiences and inputs.
Take care. Bye.
All
Bye-bye.
right.
And as
Bye-bye.
always, for any support, reach out to MindSmith team. All of us are here to support you in your journey and also to help find ways to reduce shame and create a safe space at home.
Give us a call.
Yes. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.